Hey, Garrett, you know how I like books?
Yeah, you never shut up about them.
That's true. They're amazing. And you know what always frustrated me was that I was wasting valuable book reading time in a stupid 30-minute commute to and from work. That's an hour of booklessness that I could have remedied.
Don't be bookless, Emily.
Yeah, you want to know what I did? I got Audible. Audible is an amazing, amazing thing. I tried it out a couple years ago, and I have been hooked ever since. Once a month, I get a brand new audiobook. Occasionally, I get more if I decide I need more. But it's just such a great way to fit in an extra book in my life.
So what kind of books do you listen to, Emily?
I kind of listen to everything. I listen to history, biographies. I really like listening to crime novels on audiobooks, but they have everything. You can find almost any book on Audible. One of my favorites was I just finished Catherine of Aragon, The True Queen by Alison Weir. She's got her whole series coming out on audiobooks, and you can find it on Audible, guys. And you want to know what's even cooler?
What's cooler than that?
We can offer our listeners a free 30-day trial and get them hooked. They have over 180,000 titles to choose from, and you can listen to it on your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or any sort of MP3 player, including your Zune. I know you still have that.
You know, I was going to make a joke about the Zune, and then I was like, she's not going to mention the Zune. And then you mentioned the Zune.
Do I know you or what?
Too well.
If our listeners want to get a free 30-day trial of Audible, they can just go to audibletrial.com/tutor. Again, that's audibletrial.com/tutor, and you get a free 30-day trial and an audiobook. So check that out.
And yeah, like you think, audiobook, I can blow through this pretty quick. Audiobooks are super long. Like that's so much content that you're getting for that free trial.
It's wonderful. I'm obsessed with it.
It really is.
So if you love reading and you want to find a way to fit another book into your life, go to audible.com. Get a free trial, 180,000 titles, and you'll be happy.
Talk Tudor, baby.
Tutor, 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 the exploder. That was bad.
Do you guys know where Henry is?
He's in your backpack. Henry,
cod
no
piece,
killing.
Cod piece, cod piece.
I'm the cod piece loaded up with things and knickknacks too.
Okay, we're done.
Hello and welcome to another great, wonderful, super silly episode of Tudor I Hardly Know Her.
That's right, Emily.
Thanks, Garrett.
I've got nothing else to add to that. I'm sorry.
That's fine. I am Emily.
And I'm Garrett.
And I'm Jeffrey.
Jeffrey's sleepy.
Jeffrey's sleepy right now.
Jeffrey's sleepy, but sometimes when you catch Jeff in the right sleepy moment, he gets slap happy and he's even funnier.
So if I start saying incoherent things, don't worry, that's normal for me.
That's normal for sleepy Jeff. So I want you to know that so I started researching this episode a couple hours ago, and I could have been done. Like, I think I started researching around 6:30, and I could have been done at like 7:30, but I kept going until 9:45, and then I was like, oh, hey, it's almost time to record. And I actually, proud moment for me, I made a Tudor family tree.
Ooh.
But I went all the way back to Edward III because that's relevant to this episode. And I did most of it from memory, and I was super freaking proud of myself. So I want to post that online because I think it helps explain a ton. That is confusing. And Garrett, if you want, I can even send a picture to you through our phones if you get confused, because this could be confusing. Because
I'm going to be confused. Also, speaking of being confused, I saw somebody said that they were like yelling at me like through their podcast when they were listening to the quiz episode. I am so sorry. Remember, Emily's the tutor. I am not. Well, she's not the tutor. That's somebody else.
No, she's the tutor TM. I'm just the tutor educator.
It's because you fart a lot.
Yes, I'm the tutor. Right, Jeff? Exactly.
We're a
but
very crass show here.
we had fun. We had fun with that one. I really liked.
Fart jokes. I think that's our first one, right?
Yeah, but we made a lot of crap jokes because dysentery. So.
We play a lot of Oregon Trail.
Are you gonna be able to
Also,
hear that?
fun fact: Henry died by shitting himself to death.
That was Henry V who shat himself to death.
Also
Wait,
known as
really?
Elvis.
No, I'm very
Did
very
Did we
serious.
talk about this before?
We may have,
Well,
but
bring it up again because it's new to me.
Henry V, the winner of the Battle of Agincourt, which is one of the most well-known battles if you like history, shat himself to death because he got dysentery, and it was awkward.
Mm-hmm.
It was super awkward because he left a baby in charge.
Then the baby had to take over the wagon, and then the wagon wheel broke, and then to go hunt buffalo.
Shit.
Nothing but Oregon Trail jokes.
Oh, poop. I think I fucked up my family tree.
Well, as long as the Tudor family tree's okay, then we're good.
Well, damn it.
Uh-oh.
Damn it. Henry.
What'd you fuck up?
Well, I think I put Henry IV and Henry V instead of Henry V and Henry VI. And like,
Classic mistake.
I can fix it. Hey, good news. We are now on Stitcher.
Are we?
Yeah, I literally just like 2 seconds ago just got the email saying you are now on Stitcher.
Oh, that's cool.
So if you guys have been waiting to listen to us on Stitcher, we here.
I mean, how would they know that we'd be on Stitcher if they didn't know we were on Stitcher?
Because they could be listening to us through another menial means. And they're like, man, I really wish this was on Stitcher, but instead I have to listen to it through this stupid podcast app that I don't even really like. And instead,
Which is called iTunes.
I like iTunes. They just did
Look,
an update. That's nice.
iTunes used to be so good, and then there was like an update to iTunes, and then it just got awful.
Oh, it's
like,
because, yeah. Not that.
I hate change. That's what I hate.
Aw, poor Gior.
I like what I know.
Well, sorry about this, but there is a change. Okay, I didn't fuck it up that bad. I just forgot a Henry.
Once again, easy mistake because there's like 3,000 of them.
Only in this family tree 8. Okay, so today I don't think we've yet told people what we're talking about.
Nope, we've been dancing around that since we started.
We are going to finally discuss Henry VII. I realized we've made a very egregious error in not talking about him because he is the Tudor. So we're going to remedy that tonight.
Tonight.
Welcome to Hank Chat. All Henry.
Welcome
all
to the
time.
Hanky Panky.
That was the name of Henry VIII's autobiography. Hanky Panky, the life
I
and
came, I
times
saw,
of the
then I came again.
No, I saw. It's like there's a Pitbull song that's first lines are, I came, I saw, or I saw, I conquered, I came, or no wait, what's the original?
I came, I saw, I conquered.
I came, and he goes, or should I say, I saw, I conquered, I came.
Nice.
Dirty.
That's probably a Henry quote.
No, I think Hanky Panky is better. For some reason, I think he likes. I'm gonna pretend he likes puns. And since Hank is a nickname,
And that's like his autobiography. It's like all of his just like his bedroom memoirs. It's
Hanky
like a very
Panky.
trashy romance novel.
I hope they serve beer in hell. The
Yes.
Henry VIII story.
oh my God,
Oh my
that
God,
is
that would be a good cover.
absolutely Henry VIII. I can totally imagine him being disgusting like that.
Yeah,
Okay.
fuck Tucker Max, but that's a great idea.
But we're not here to talk about 8. We're here to talk about 7. Okay?
Because 7, 8, 9.
No, he didn't. Okay, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. So here's the thing about Henry VII. He's not really remembered for very much besides destroying Richard III and being a cheapskate. And
I mean, you beat Richard III. I mean, that's all you
Yeah.
need, right?
right.
Hank beat Dick.
Right. So Hank beat Dick.
Oh, guys.
That was Jeff, not me.
Slap happy hour.
I like Slap Happy Hour. Slappy
Welcome
Hour.
to the Slap Happy Hour.
Jeff
where
Slappy the Squirrel. Okay, so when I first started doing this, I had just listened to a podcast, and I will tell you guys the name of it at the relevant point in my educational story. But they spoke a little bit about Henry VII, and so I was like, okay, well, I'll probably talk about how he was a cheapskate and how he defeated Richard III. And then there's so much more to him. So I genuinely believe this is going to end up being a 2-part episode because there's so
Ooh.
much to cover. And like
we haven't had one of those since what, Anne Boleyn?
and the only reason we did our Anne Boleyn as a 2-part episode was because we thought 30 minutes was sufficient. And so now I'm wondering if this is going to be like a full hour and a half, 2-hour episode. So let's
So,
see where it takes us.
Snuggle up with a nice glass of wine and your cozy blanket and get ready for an
Hank
extra,
chat.
extra amount of Tudors.
Or
Tutors late
Or-
night.
welcome to Tudors Late Night.
Tudors After Dark.
I mean, it's really dark. Okay, so let's start. So you guys may remember he was born to Margaret Beaufort when she was fucking 13 years old in 1457. So he was born right in like the first quarter of the Wars of the Roses. So I have to give you a Wars of the Roses recap for you to really understand all of the drama. So are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. So, the Wars of the Roses all involved descendants of Edward III. So, they were cousins. At the time, it was just called the Cousins' War. So, there was the House of Lancaster, which descended from Edward's third son, John of Gaunt. And then there was the House of York, which descended from Edward's fourth son, Edmund, Duke of York. Okay? So, Henry VI was on the throne at this time, and his cousin Richard, Duke of York, was like, "Nah, you're not doing that great of a job. Let me take over. I'm going to wage battle." So there was a ton of flip-flopping. So Henry VI was on the throne, and then before Richard of York could become king, he died. So his eldest living son Edward hopped on the throne. So it went Henry VI, Edward IV, back to Henry VI, Edward IV, Richard III. So there was a ton of chaos. So Richard III was the brother of Edward IV. So Henry Tudor was he was also a cousin, but John of Gaunt had married a couple times, so he was a different kind of cousin. He was a nephew. Sorry, not cousin, nephew. I know it's really confusing, and I'm very sorry. I'm trying to simplify it. You can't simplify this, though. Like, I have a friend who was messaging me, and she's like, "So he was whose cousin, and why wasn't he next in line?" And it's not. You can't just go directly down the line. You can try, but it's there are too many cousins marrying each other for that to happen. So Henry VI was a Lancaster, and after a couple of deaths, Henry Tudor was in line for the throne at some point. So for like 30 years, these two branches of Jeff's like looking around, like Jeff's so tired. He's just looking around like a child. He's just
Don't feel bad, Jeff. She lost me too.
I'm sorry.
There's a cousin who's upset with another cousin,
Yeah.
and there's another cousin who's like, I'm a cousin too. Oh, we're cousins? Cousins. Fight!
Yeah, Jeff's got it. So that cousin fighting, they WWE'd for about 30 years.
Monday night cage fight with the cousins.
So they, for like 30 years, there were big battles. It was a long, long war, and they'd think it ended, and then something shitty would happen, and then it'd restart. So Spoiler alert, when Henry Tudor defeated Richard III, it actually brought peace to England for the first time in a very long time. So it's relevant. Okay, so there's your background. And now back to Henry Tudor.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, so he's the son of Margaret Beaufort and Edmund Tudor, and we've had episodes about both of them. However, you may remember Edmund died before Henry was even born. And Margaret had a very traumatic birth. It probably wrecked her vag, and she could never have kids again.
Way to put that lightly.
I mean, it happens. So the Tudors, Edmund and his brother Jasper, they were of Welsh descent. So Henry VII was of Welsh descent. That is relevant later. So Jasper Tudor is Edmund's brother and Henry's uncle. I have a family tree. I can send it to you if you want it, Garrett.
This is like when I had to watch, like when I first started
That
watching
may be
Game of
helpful.
Thrones.
I know. I have the family tree.
Yeah. No, that's how I watched Game of Thrones in the
With
beginning.
the family
I sat
tree,
there with
I
the family
know.
tree, and
I know.
all right, so this is so-and-so, and this
Well,
is
I already
so-and-so.
told you Game of Thrones was taken from this war.
Oh, I know.
Okay, so
There's no way it could have been taken from this world because everyone has different names.
Oh my god, that'd be great. That'd be like half the characters in Game of Thrones were named John, and like there are like 5
Oh my
Daenerys's, and
fucking funny.
I still haven't seen that season yet.
Well, you should. It's good.
I will start it in November.
Wunderbar. Okay, so when Henry's father died and when Margaret gave birth, Jasper, his uncle, protected Henry and Margaret. So this was when Henry VI was still on the throne. This is when Henry Tudor's uncle was in power and everything was okie dokie. So then when Henry was 4, Edward IV was like, get the fuck off the throne, 6. And Jasper had to go into exile because he was a Lancastrian supporter. So there was some John Kerry level flip-flopping happening. Wow, that just dated me. So Margaret and Henry were given their guardianship because, as a reminder, Margaret was still a child. Guardianship was given to a Yorkist, but then some more Wars of the Roses flip-flopping happened, and Henry VI was back on the throne, and Jasper returned, and Henry Tudor was brought to court. So it was 1471, and Henry was... I'm bad at math. Under 20. Hold on. Under 20. He was 15. 16. I don't know. So, I wrote Revenge of the Sixth.
oh,
Get out.
No, I liked that one. So Revenge of the Sixth happened. But then Edward IV hopped right back onto the throne in 1471, and he got to murdering. So he killed 6, so it wasn't such a Revenge of the Sixth. And Jasper...
It was like A New Hope.
There was a new hope for the Yorks. Less so for Henry. He had to flee with Jasper to Brittany because they were the remaining Lancastrian claimants.
Where?
Brittany? Okay, so here's why I want to have a whole episode about France and that whole thing. So you have France, but it's not France as we know it today. There were dukedoms around it.
Oh.
And Brittany was a dukedom. So it was autonomous of France, but I think they like paid the King of France money to keep... It was like a gangster. Like, I'm pretty sure the King of France was a gangster, and he's like, this is a really nice piece of land you have here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. And so the Duke of Brittany paid France, but they were autonomous.
Okay.
I think I might be making that whole thing up.
I would believe you.
Okay,
if you
well,
did.
I spoke with enough authority, so that's what happened.
I just thought you were talking about they ran to some chick. I was so confused.
So then this chick Brittany popped over, and she's like, hey.
Hey, guys.
Oh, every Brittany I know does not talk like that.
I know. We know a lot of Brittany's.
We do, but they're cool. Love you, Brittany's. None of them listen to this. I am sad. Okay, so Francis II was the Duke of Brittany, and he told Henry, hey, I'll protect you. Mostly he's just like, fuck England, let's piss him off. I'm going to help this claimant guy. And that's like their MO. So at one point, the Duke gets sick, and Brittany's other governors wanted to turn Henry over to Edward IV to kind of get some goodwill going on. But Henry VII pulled a Ferris Bueller, and he was like, my tummy hurts, and he ran away. I'm not kidding. He like was going down the Seine River on a float singing, what's the song?
Twist and Shout.
Twist and Shout. So he pulled a Ferris Bueller. I'm just kidding. He went to a monastery, but he did pretend to be sick. So he was like, my stomach hurts, and he was like, I gotta go to this monastery that's conveniently gonna keep me safe. So all this time, Henry was separated from his mother, Margaret. And while she was back in England, she was like trying to get some goodwill with the Yorkists. But she was secretly trying to get her son back in, especially when Richard the Dick came onto the throne. Richard the Dick came. Anyway, Dick the Dick. So more flip-flopping happened. Henry VI was dead. Richard IV died of a cold, and Richard III was on the throne. Richard III's son died, and Edward IV's two sons were murdered. So all that were left for the Yorks were Edward IV's daughters. So Margaret, Henry's mother, made an alliance with the mother of the daughters, the leftover Yorks. That was awful. The leftover Yorks, and Henry was like, hey, I'll marry your oldest one if you help me out. So they agreed. So he tried to invade England a couple years, but shit went down, and then his main supporter in England, the Duke of Buckingham, was executed because Richard the Dick found out what was happening. So then Richard III tried getting... So first, Edward IV tried getting Henry out of Brittany, and now Richard III is trying. And Henry just skedaddled over to France proper. So he's in France proper. And because they were French, they were like, yeah, fuck up England. Here's a whole army. So because Henry was Welsh, he was able to kind of hop on over through Wales and get a ton of support there. And they were just like, yeah, go on through. We don't like this motherfucker on the throne. So him, with the help of Jasper Tudor, and he had 5,000 soldiers, invaded England. And then because Richard III was a shitbag, some of his supporters switched sides during the Battle of Bosworth. So... mainly it was the Stanley brothers, William, and we talked about this in one of the other episodes. I can't remember his name. Probably Thomas or Richard. I don't know.
Safe bet.
What'd you say?
I said safe bet.
Yeah. So they, in the middle of the battle, so they just kind of held their armies back, and they wanted to see which side the battle would go before they committed to one or the other. So finally they were like, okay, we're
Once
with
again,
Henry.
safe bet.
Usually. So the Battle of Bosworth happened on August 22nd, 1485, and Richard the Dick was defeated, and Henry was only 28. I have not defeated an evil king.
So, hold on. Is this Hamlet?
I don't know the origins of Hamlet. Yes, I do. It's fucking Lion King.
Yeah, okay. So when you were going through this, I was thinking this sounds a lot like Lion King. Wait, Lion King's based on Hamlet. So I should say that this sounds like Hamlet, so I sound smarter. But you just went ahead and said Lion King, so it's all good.
No. Shakespeare wrote Lion King first.
He did.
And then he did Hamlet.
Yes. No, he actually wrote about...
genius.
He had a whole series of plays about each of these English kings. I think the only one he didn't have was Henry VIII because Elizabeth was queen and he wasn't going to insult her father. But he did write a play about...
that's the story, right? The evil king takes over, dad's dead, the young boy is sent away in exile, then comes back with an army and takes back his throne.
Yes. an army of
And then he meets
meerkats
a pig and a meerkat.
pigs, and a crazy baboon. I think the crazy baboon in this situation is Jasper Tudor. Don't know why. Maybe it's the Welsh. Aw.
What about Zazu?
Shakespeare's a dick.
He's a monkey's
Zazu
uncle.
didn't do anything. He just sang lovely coconuts.
Yeah, that was
He's
one
a
of the best parts of the movie.
He still didn't do shit. Zazu. I mean, he was a cool advisor, but for all intents and purposes, he was just stuck in a cage. Okay, back to real history and the question you asked. Shakespeare wrote a series of plays: Henry V, Henry VI, Henry VII, not Henry VII, but he did write a play about Richard III, and that's where all the Richard III apologists out there, before they actually found his body a couple years ago, were like, Shakespeare just made up that Richard had a hunchback. That's not true. There's no evidence of that. They're just making it up. It's propaganda. And then they found his body a couple years ago, and in fact, he had a big ass hunch.
What?
You know,
What? He was like Igor.
back on the Shakespeare plays about the kings. Were those like parodies, or were they just like straight up historical?
Okay, so they're supposed to be historical, but also remember Elizabeth Tudor is the winning side of these. So she's gonna. Shakespeare would
And
have
she
made
wrote
sure that, and she wrote them, and then she slept with herself. So Shakespeare
Sounds
would
like a good existence. You get to write history and just dill
Well,
around.
Actually, that's how the whole Wars of the Roses idea came about. So if you were a York or a Lancaster in the mid 1400s, you weren't like caring. So the Yorks had the representation of the white rose, and the Lancasters had the representation of the red rose, but that didn't actually exist. Henry VII started that propaganda of uniting the two houses. So the Tudor emblem is a white rose inside of a red rose, and it's supposed to be the combination of the two houses. But the Yorks and the Lancasters weren't waving red and white roses around. It wasn't a thing. So there is a lot. I mean, you always have to take history with a grain of salt because it's written by the victors. So the Tudors were the victors in this situation, so they're going to make Henry VI look like a saint and Richard III look like an evil, conniving monster. And, you know, they're going to do that. And I still see it. When I was researching, I could tell that, okay, so I was researching about this on a website called EnglishHistory.net, and you could tell that this person loved Richard III because you know how I told you that Stanley betrayed Richard III on the battlefield? Well, the woman was like, I say woman, the author said, quote, it was a disgraceful betrayal, and then said that Henry VII was cowardly. So it's really all about perspective and then whoever the victor is. So there are a ton of Richard III apologists out there and people who really support him. I think he's a giant bastard. I think he murdered his nephews, and I think, you know, there's a lot of complication in historical figures like Catherine of Aragon. I don't think she was a saint. I don't think she was a terrible woman. I think she was a human being, but she didn't murder anyone. If she did, I wouldn't care for her. Richard III, before the murders, he was kind of a dick, but it like, if you're a murderer, you're a monster. And I'm pretty damn sure he's a murderer. So, okay, anyway. History. Take it with a grain of salt. Remember that. The more you know. Okay, so Henry VII is now King of England. August 22nd, 1485. However...
He's 28 years old?
He is 28 years old. However,
oh my God, I feel like shit now.
Oh my, you know, I thought the same thing, but then I remembered that Margaret Beaufort had him when she was 13, and I'm like, I don't feel like shit anymore.
I have a really bad problem with, like, now that I'm getting older and stuff, I get carded less when I need my ID.
Isn't that kind of depressing?
I hear about all these like hot young celebrities.
Oh.
I'm like, oh man, like how old is that guy? Oh man, what did I do?
It really throws me off when you see a celebrity who's like, I was born in 1996, and I'm like, what are you?
Oh man, so I'm producing this show for a radio station. This is a big aside, and the guy was the host was talking about how he grew up with iCarly, and it like blew my fucking mind.
That's the thing is like I will occasionally see pieces that are like the Nickelodeon shows you grew up with or the Disney shows you grew up with, and I'm like, yeah, like Lizzie McGuire and Even Stevens, and then you watched all the Disney Channel original movies like the Even Stevens movie and the Lizzie McGuire movie. Like that's what my growing up with Disney Channel was like. But now it's like iCarly, and I don't even know the other shows. Like
Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, Wizards of Waverly Place.
Yes. Yes, we're old,
Yeah.
but not as old as Henry VII. He's dead now.
Yeah, he big dead.
He picked. Okay, so Henry won the Battle of Bosworth on August 22nd, but he declared himself king as of August 21st. So that meant that anybody who fought against him in the Battle of Bosworth was treasonous, and he could, kill them.
Smart move.
So he got to work very, very, very quickly consolidating his power. He was coronated on October 30th, 1485. So almost happy coronation day, Henry VII.
Yeah.
So he married Elizabeth of York on January 18th, 1486. And remember, she was the leftover York from Edward IV. And in that, okay, so between the time he became king and he was like, hey, now I'm going to live up to my promise, he had to get 3 dispensations. I don't remember what all of them do exactly, but they're mostly because they're related. And the Pope had to say it's fine. So he had to get 3 dispensations for this, and essentially it was just because they were related and the Pope had to say it's fine. But so I think we talked about this in the Elizabeth of York episode. Richard III had declared that his brother's children were bastards, and that's how he was able to take the throne. So Henry VIII went and told the Pope, and he's like, hey, can you make my wife not a bastard anymore? Because that's not cool. So the Pope said, hey, you're not a bastard anymore. And also, this is an interesting fact, and I've always wondered about this. Okay, so Edward IV is the most recent Edward king. And then Henry VIII's son becomes Edward VI. So I always knew that Elizabeth's brother, who's also named Edward, was Edward V, but I couldn't understand why exactly that was. So the reason, what I thought to myself was Edward IV died. So the second he died, his son became Edward V. And then a couple weeks later was when Richard III was like, nope, I'm king. So I just thought that it was, even though he hadn't been coronated, the way it was. Well, it turns out Henry Tudor had declared Edward V his predecessor instead of Richard III. So that's why he's Edward V. And he's given a king's title instead of just Edward. Okay, it's cool to me. Whatever.
Okay.
Okay. So he romantically made his wife not a bastard.
Oh.
I know. I wish that was my big romantic gesture.
I wish Jeff declared me not a bastard.
Never actually thought about how bastard is just is a gender neutral thing. Every time I hear the word bastard, I always think of male.
Do you?
Yeah, because I rarely hear about a bastard girl.
That's because nobody cares about girls. I mean,
True.
Let's be serious. Nobody historically really cared about the ladies.
Yeah.
So nowadays calling somebody a bastard is just like calling them an asshole.
Yeah.
But back then you'd call them baseborn or true or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Baseborn.
yeah, I think that's like the polite way of saying it, but bastard was also not an impolite thing to say.
It was an actual a technical
it was just
term.
Like a reminder. Like, hey,
You're a bastard. Hey, that hurts my feelings. No, you are a bastard.
Oh, I guess you're right. Oh, that sucks.
You know what? I never really looked at it that way, but you know what?
Thanks, guy. So 9 months after his parents were married, Elizabeth had a bouncing baby boy named Arthur.
Ooh, I wonder what's going to happen to him.
Probably
Great
great
things.
things. His name is Arthur.
He gets
There
a
are gonna be
round table and
awesome
some knights.
things.
It's great.
He's like, you know what? I've got my own name. You know, it's
I'm not
different
named
from all the
after
other
anything
kings.
else.
It's gonna be great. It's gonna be huge.
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah, I felt gross saying that.
Take it back. Jeff, cut that out.
Bleep it out. Bleep it out so everyone's wondering what I said.
It's a mystery.
So then Henry finally had Elizabeth crowned on November 25th, 1487. So 2 years after he was crowned. So here's the thing. A lot of people are like, oh, he waited that long. People who hate Henry VII, which are usually people who love Richard III, I just read that there are rumors that the reason it took Henry 5 months after he won the crown on the battle to marry Elizabeth is because he wanted to make sure she was fertile. So he was going to bang her first, whether she wanted it or no, and get her pregnant. And then they would decide he'd decide if she was worth marrying. She had to prove her fertility. There is no evidence of that. It is bullshit. I'm not even like a huge, maybe it's because I just really hate Richard III, but I don't think I'm a huge Henry VII fan. If Edward IV had stayed, I was fine with Edward IV. I just think Richard's a dick. So if Henry had defeated Edward IV and that rumor's still going around, I'd still be annoyed by it. But it did take him 2 years to get her crowned. The likely reason he waited until January after he became king is because he needed those dispensations. They got married 2 days after they arrived. So hold your horses, anybody who's not holding them. So, you ready?
Yes.
I don't think this will be a two-parter. I'm kind of flying through this.
Well, we'll see.
Man down. Okay. So, once Henry became the king, he said, basically, fuck the nobility. He wanted to make sure that they couldn't turn against him because he'd obviously seen what happened when there's nobles. So a lot of the nobles were related through blood or marriage to the royal houses. So he probably wanted to avoid any Wars of the Roses situations happening. But also he wanted to make sure that nobody could turn on him because there were still some uprisings and some people unhappy with him being king. So one of the things he did was he said you're not allowed to have liveries and maintenance. So basically that was when somebody who
liveries and what?
Maintenance. There no janitors were allowed. No, it's
what is a livery or a livery? Whatever it is.
Oh shit, is it livery? I always thought it was livery.
I thought it was livery, but whatever.
Okay, let's switch back and forth. So a livery is when so a noble would actually have people on his land who would serve him, and they'd have special badges. So the livery would be clothes in the colors of that person, that noble's house or flag or whatever you want to call it. Okay. And they would respond to that noble if that noble wanted to get an army. So you know the hierarchy is supposed to be the king is at the top, the nobles answer to the king, and then the people, the peasants basically, responded to the nobles. So if there was a problem, all the king had to say was, hey, noblemen, call your people. And then the nobleman would go and say, hey, you're wearing my livery. Come grab your torch and pitchfork and follow me.
Ah, so it's like a gang. You wear the right colors.
There were sharks and there were
Jets.
I was going to say Crips.
Come on, when you're a jet for life, Emily. We talked about
you're
this.
You're a jet all the way. So it was a large number of people who'd fight for their lord, and it was essentially a private army, and the king was not cool with that. So he was like, I'm going to say no, don't do that anymore. So he did definitely pull some dick moves when he was consolidating his power. So John de la Pole is a relation of his, and he's his nephew or something, or his uncle's nephew. I don't freaking know. I didn't look it up, and I wish I had. But he named John de la Pole his heir until Arthur was born. But he did everything he could to make sure that anybody else who could have potentially been an heir to those cousins' houses was eradicated. So I told you there was Edward IV and Richard III, and then there was their brother George, who was drowned in a barrel of wine, right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so you remember Malmsey George. He had 2 children, Margaret and Edward. Edward was the Earl of Warwick, and he was 10 years old, and Henry the Seventh arrested him because he was a rallying point for those who were unhappy with Henry being on the throne. So he was the next York in line. However, George was attainted for treason, and that basically takes away any claim he had, but still it was an extra move on Henry's power. So it kind of sucks. I mean, the kid was like 10 years old, and he wasn't exhibiting any Joffrey Baratheon type interests. Are you laughing at something? So it was just kind of a dick move. There were a couple of rebellions, though. So in 1487, a kid named Lambert Simnel. That's not a name you've heard before.
Lambert.
We're using that for our child.
I'm sorry, Lambert,
So
for that name.
Lambert Simnel, he came over to England and was like, hey, I'm the Earl of Warwick, the 10-year-old. And there was a little bit of a rebellion. And Henry VII quashed it pretty quickly. And he was like, hey, Simnel, go work in my kitchen. So he worked in his kitchen. And that was the end of that one. So that one was 2 years after Henry got to the throne. And then 5 years after he got on the throne in 1490, this is the one people know. Not you, but others. So there's a guy named Perkin Warbeck. Once again, another name you wouldn't have heard of.
Perkin Warbeck?
Warbeck.
Like Daddy Warbucks?
No, Warbeck.
Oh.
Yeah, like Beck, like
They
the
did call
shitty
him
singer.
Daddy Warbeck, so.
And he had a little orphan named Anne.
Annie. Little
Back
orphan
then, everyone had a
Annie.
kid named Anne. She was nothing special.
So in 1490, Perkin Warbeck claimed to be Richard, the son of Edward IV. He was one of the 2 boys who was lost in the tower and never seen again. Okay? He would, if he was alive, he would have had a stronger claim to the throne than Henry Tudor.
Okay.
Because he's right there.
Let's pull up the diagram.
I've got the diagram. He would have been right there. And Henry Tudor was right there. Well, I mean, I guess it all depends on how you view the legitimacy of the whole fucking thing. So anyway, he popped up and said, hey, I'm Richard, who would have been the brother of the Queen, Elizabeth of York. So super awkward family moment. However, this was a really dangerous rebellion because he had the support of Edward and Richard III's sister. Her name was Margaret, Duchess of Burgundy. Plus, King James IV of Scotland threw his hat in the ring, and he's like, hey, let's fuck up England. Here's an army. So he invaded and supported Perkin Warbeck. And then there were altogether 4 invasions. And then finally in 1497, he was captured and executed. At that point, he was like a teenager. He was like 16 years old when it happened, but good times were not had by anybody who tried to rebel. And there was so much of that happening that ultimately Henry VII executed the Earl of Warwick. So he was just about 20-ish when that happened. No. Yeah, he would have been like 20-ish when that happened. So that was really shitty. It's possible that that was done. I meant to look this up and I didn't. But I think that Earl of Warwick's execution was in part to marry Arthur to the Castilian princess Catalina, or as you guys know her, Catherine of Aragon.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's possible that Isabel and Ferdinand, her parents were like, we want to make sure that if our daughter goes over there, she's going to be safe, so could you guys get rid of that guy? I can't 100% be sure about that, though, so I will look it up and confirm at some point, maybe in a year. Okay, so here's the part where Henry's known as like a miser with money. He was like Scrooge McDuck. So the country was nearly bankrupt. The treasury had almost no money in it when Henry got to the throne because wars are fucking expensive. So Henry kind of went nuts trying to make sure that he got money. So he avoided war, which is yay. But then he also enforced very strict taxes. Boo. And then he also promoted trade. Yay. So by the end of the 1400s, the treasury was getting a revenue of 100,000 pounds a year. And that's in the 1490s.
Huh.
So he did a really great job. And he did... I think part of the reason that he's got this reputation as being a miser is because he did enforce those strict taxes, and like nobody likes taxes, so nobody's going to say a good thing about that, but it brought the country back from bankruptcy, and then his idiot son spent it all. So the tax collecting was almost brutal. And then another way he made sure he got money was he didn't create a lot of nobles. So it was that whole thing of like he didn't trust the nobles. So whenever a noble died without having a male heir, Henry VIII would just be like, yeah, whatever, I'll just take that land. And the land equated money. So they kept the land for the crown. Now, do you guys want to know about, I can tell you about the different kinds of money, but I wrote it down. I really don't think you need to know. But do you guys want to know about the different ways they collected money back then?
Sure.
Okay, you asked for it. So there's ordinary revenue, which is like crown lands, customs dues, and feudal taxes, things like that, normal stuff. Then there's extraordinary money, which is when Harry Potter walked in and he's like, here's a galleon, go nuts. Just seeing if you guys are listening. Okay, so that's extraordinary revenue is when Henry would go to the Parliament and say, hey, could you make people give me money through taxes? And Parliament would have to okay it. And then there was another thing called feudal aid, and it was mostly for if the king was captured in battle and then held ransom, but it was also a noble could give the king money if he needed it. So back to the nobles again. So I read a thing. It said it's estimated that every 25 years, 25% of the nobility died off. They just like wouldn't reproduce enough. So Henry he very rarely created more. And he didn't ennoble very many people, but those he did, he kind of brought up from nothing. And so they were incredibly loyal to him. It wasn't just well, my father's been the Earl of blah, blah, blah for so long. So in his reign, he only created 1 earl and 5 barons. So that's his entire reign from 1485 to 1509. Edward IV, who reigned a little less than that, he created 9 earls and 13 barons. So Henry VIII didn't really do it very much. And in his reign, the noble count dropped from 57 noble families to only 44. And Henry just kept all that land to himself. He did grant the Order of the Garter to a lot of people. It was like a good job, you, but it doesn't cost me money. So it was a way of honoring people, but not really costing any money. And then another way he controlled the nobles was he was able to say, well, I get final say in who you marry, and I don't want your family marrying your family, because the two of you together would be too powerful. So that marriage is not allowed. But this one is go marry the peasant. So the podcast I was listening to, it was in the History of England podcast, which is amazing, guys. You should listen to it. Not you guys, our listeners. In episode 208, I Heart Henry, they talked about this a little bit. So before Henry VII, an act of attainder would be passed on a noble. And it would be, here's your act of attainder, slap on the wrist. The noble would say sorry, pay a fine, get everything back, because the act of attainder would take everything. Well, Henry VII stopped letting it be a slap on the wrist. Sometimes he would let people pay the fee, but most of the time it was like, this is the end of your family. So he kept the attainders in place, and it meant even more money. And then there was another thing. So nobles would pay money. It was almost like a pawn shop type deal where they'd give, like the lesser nobles would give the king 400 pounds And the more wealthy nobles would give the king 10,000 pounds.
Jesus.
I know, it's a lot to me even now. And imagine this back in that time. So you give them that money and they'd say, I promise that I'm going to do blah, blah, and blah. If they held up to their promises, Henry would give them their money back. If not, Henry kept the money. So it was like a weird pawn shop type deal. So it's kind of interesting. However, to like counteract that whole Henry was a miser thing. Oh, so there's an author. Her name is Tracy Borman. Yeah, Borman. And she wrote a book called The Private Lives of Tudors. And she's the chief curator at historic royal palaces. And she found documents that said Henry VII spent 3 million pounds on his clothes in the first 2 years of his reign.
Ooh. Fancy boy.
I know. He's such a fancy boy. Anyway. So, are you ready for your weekly Henry VIII fun fact?
Yes. We haven't had one of these in a while.
We haven't. So, speaking of finances, Henry VII spent 6 million pounds a year on alcohol.
As you should.
I don't see a problem with that.
3.5 million pounds a year on meat.
Again.
And his divorce
problem.
from Anne of Cleves cost him 30 million pounds.
Yikes.
Yeah, it's a lot. I do that.
This is a fact about Henry VIII?
That was Henry VIII.
Okay.
Because we haven't had one of those in a while and we were talking about money.
Yeah.
Okay. So Henry VII was pretty baller. He actually convinced the Pope to excommunicate anybody who pretended to be a king for the English throne. So they were damned to hell. Like, that's power. And he had a lot of control over his kingdom, as I've said a little bit. Jesus. He used justices of the peace to control people across the land. Like, they'd be, the police. They'd be the sheriff of Nottingham. Okay, so a little bit more about his personal life. Henry had 4 children who lived: Arthur, Margaret, Henry, and Mary. And that's their order. These are the ones who lived past infancy. One thing said he had an illegitimate son. Another thing said he didn't have any mistresses. So IDK.
Would it be safe to say that most royalty had a mistress or side piece?
Yeah, but Henry VII adored his wife Elizabeth. Now, even though it was like a purely political, we need to fix the country marriage, he loved his wife. So when Arthur died, somebody had to, a chaplain or something of that sort, gave Henry the news, and he just started sobbing upon hearing about that. And Elizabeth rushed to him and comforted him, and he told her, and she acted really strong, and she said, we can still have more children. And then she went away, and she started crying so loudly that Henry heard her from the fucking palace, and he ran to her to comfort her. So she actually died the following year. She gave birth to a daughter, Catherine, and both of them died. Elizabeth died a couple days after the birth, and Catherine died a couple days after that. And Henry was so distressed, he locked himself in his room for a couple of days, and he refused to speak to anyone. So he desperately loved Elizabeth. So it's possible he didn't have a mistress. Elizabeth gave birth to 8 of his children. So, after a couple, you could pretty much say we're done. Succession is secure. So you know how Arthur was engaged to Catherine, and then married to Catherine, then Arthur died, and Catherine was a widow. Henry actually considered marrying her, which is gross. So the whole thing is, though, she had that real. Do you guys remember when we talked about how she had a fucking shit ton of money in her dowry?
Mm-hmm.
He would have kept that if she'd stayed in England and married him. So, unfortunately, Catherine's mother passed, and that realistically made her not as she wasn't as good of a political pawn. So she wasn't really worth marrying at that point. So Henry considered remarrying. He looked at a queen of Naples who had been widowed. Her name was Joan. And he sent ambassadors to check these women out and report on how good they were looking. And here's a testament to how much he loved Elizabeth. He told his ambassadors he wanted a wife that looked like Elizabeth, which, creepy, but sweet.
Sweet and creepy.
Yes.
Creepy sweet.
Sweepy. It's very sweepy.
So sweepy. Hey, sweepy. Jeffrey Sweepy.
Much like Jeff.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Sweepy. Okay, so he was a doting father and husband. So looking at your the financial records left behind, of which there are many, he actually spent a lot of money on his children and his wife. He bought his daughter Mary a really expensive lute, which, you know, music instrument. And he actually bought his wife a lion for her menagerie. So he spent 1,500 pounds on a lion for her.
Was that a thing people had back in the day? Just
Yes,
menageries?
the Tower of London had a menagerie, and there were lions and giraffes and animals of that ilk in it. And that was during Henry VII's and Mary Tudors and Elizabeth I's reign.
Do you think that'd be an interesting episode? That sounds fascinating.
I do want to do an episode about pets, so I'll make sure we talk about the menageries as well.
Oh, man. Thank you.
You're welcome. So after Elizabeth died, Henry got incredibly sick. They all thought he was going to die. His mother rushed to his side to nurse him back to health. She had given birth to the daughter and then died in the Tower of London, which had been a residence up to that point, and it was never used as a residence again. So a little while later, in 1509, he became ill with tuberculosis, and he died on April 21st, 1509, and he was buried right next to Elizabeth. Do you guys remember the tuberculosis rap? Did you guys ever see that? I think he was either Australian or New Zealand. I'm really sorry if it offends you that I don't know the difference between an Australian and a New Zealand guy. But he was like, he had TB and he was stuck in a ward where he wasn't allowed to leave anywhere. So he made a rap video. Did you ever see that? It was like early YouTube days. It was pretty funny. But anyway, so descriptions of Henry said he was extremely intelligent, very friendly, very dignified. He was pretty good looking, bad teeth apparently. So I already talked about how the roses were propaganda. So here's just a little bit of extra information. Henry VII was incredibly close to his mother. He made sure she was the greatest landowner after himself and Elizabeth. And then he named her Femme Sole, which meant that she answered to no man. She didn't have any other man in charge of her property. They couldn't tell her what to do. She was a strong, independent woman. And then about his marriage to Elizabeth of York, a lot of people think that she was very subjective and yes, but she just, let's be honest, she probably didn't want to get involved too heavily in politics after seeing all of the shit her father died, her uncle was a fucking murderer, her brothers were killed. She probably didn't want to get involved in politics at that point. So, she stayed away, didn't offer political advice, just raised the children and was really obedient. And some people actually suggest that that's why Henry VIII had so much trouble finding a happy marriage, was because he saw the perfect wife as basically his mother, who was subjective and did whatever was told and never fought. So maybe that's why he loved boring Jane Seymour so much. There was one more thing. Oh, fun fact. Based on the family tree, Catherine of Aragon had a better claim to the English throne than Henry VII.
Huh.
Yep. So the first Henrys, the 4th, 5th, and 6th, they were all descended from John of Gaunt's first wife. Then John of Gaunt got married again to Constance of Castile, and her line led directly to Catherine of Aragon. His third marriage led to Henry VII. However, and I know I've talked about this before, I just think it's cool. Catherine Swynford was his mistress first, and she gave birth to her children before they were married. So they were all bastards. So then the cousin one day was like, the king cousin was like, well, I'll make you legitimate, except you are not allowed to inherit the throne. So that was never lifted. So Henry VII, when he claimed the throne, he was like, this is through conquest. He was like, I'm William the Conqueror, all up in here. This is how I claim the throne. So if it had gone directly down, there is a law in England that says if you're born outside of England, you can't inherit the throne, which didn't really apply to James VI of Scotland for some reason. So she wouldn't have really been able to inherit it. But based on the family tree, Catherine of Aragon, it comes before Henry VII. I think that's it.
Well, all right.
That was a long one.
It was really long, yeah. But very interesting.
It was very information heavy. But I liked it.
Good job, Em.
Thanks, guys. Guess what's coming up next?
What do we do next?
Spooky Tudors.
Oh, my God, yes.
Tudor ghost stories. I'm excited for that one.
Yeah, I'm pretty stoked.
And celebration of Halloween. And then we've got a bunch of really awesome episodes. I'm pretty pumped about all of them. Yeah, that's it. I did my information. We're done. Go away.
Cool.
Wait, I'm just kidding. Don't go away. Rate and review and subscribe. Pretty please. Tell your friends.
Share us with people who you think might like us.
Yes, please. Find us on Facebook and find us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @TudorKnowHer. And on Facebook, we're just Tudor I Hardly Know Her. If you go there now, you'll see a recent video I posted of a full contact jousting.
That was amazing.
It was amazing
that
and
was
incredibly
pretty nuts.
violent. I swear I thought the writer was dead. He got
He got hit in the head first,
yeah, first he got hit in the head.
and then he was kind of looking a little unstable on his horse before they went on that last route.
yeah.
And then the video we posted was the very last hit. They
And-
both struck each other,
and
and
the-
he dropped.
And the reason my camera went down was because he dropped off the horse and I thought he was dead. So you see him get struck by the horse and you see both knights go backwards over their horses, but you don't see him drop. So just know he dropped, but he's alive. He might have a concussion or two, but he's alive. But that's the kind of shit we share on Facebook. So keep an eye out for stuff like that. And yes, that's it. And now we're on Stitcher. So if you want to find us on Stitcher, you can go there. So, right. And until next time.
Until next time, you guys.
Yay.
Divorced,
Divorced,
beheaded,
beheaded,
died.
died.
Divorced, beheaded,
Divorced, beheaded,
survived.
Survive.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.